All today's speakers join us up here behind the podium, and we'll do question and answer. And also, as Mara Kay noted before, there are a couple of other important Greens who are with us. Cliff Thornton, who ran for governor of Connecticut in 2006 and faced his own challenge in trying to get into the debates, and also Dr. Janet Eaton from the Green Party of Canada, where they're laughing at us. And we have a question, please. Yes.
All right. Well, can I ask Mr. Nader the $64,000 question? Do you plan a presidential run in 2008?
Well, as I say about every day now, it's too early for me to decide. One of the reasons is we would have to get thousands of volunteers and pro bono lawyers to get ready for the Democratic Party's quadrennial assault on our right to be on the ballot. I'd never have to say that if I was in Canada, would I? Or Belgium, or Norway, or Germany. So it's too early to say. I'll make up my mind before the end of the year.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
For all the Go We Go stuff, you've still run again and again as an alternate emperor talking head, looking much like the other patriarchal grand balloons. When I asked you years ago why you don't pick a cabinet to campaign with you, you said the trouble is who it would leave out. So does that mean that you see cabinet posts like an ambassadorship a reward for service? And why do you still refuse to name 12 or 15 experts in the cabinet areas to embody the progressive platform and offer a photogenic team to excite the 80% of Americans who never vote? Will you name 5 or 6 cabinet heads right now or this evening?
I really admire how prepared your question is. Use the word balloon?
That's Kurt Vonnegut's term for the people, the leaders, the so-called
leaders.
Oh, that's a Kurt Vonnegut grand balloon.
Anything to enrich the vocabulary of politics. Really, it's not up to someone who isn't a candidate to do that. I mean, if someone is a candidate, it's an interesting idea, like a shadow cabinet.
Right.
But I must take issue with your word, since you are a wordsmith,
Thank you.
with your word photogenic. Are you representing the Revlon standard?
Well, look at this picture here.
Yeah.
If you run every 4 years,
Yeah.
it's this guy, it's this possible emperor, or this possible emperor, or this.
So that's what you mean. You don't mean it in a cosmetic.
No, not at all.
I
Just
see.
look at you. These are all people that knew. If these were experts in the cabinet areas, you would split up and campaign in, actually problem solve in America every 4 years. Instead of, talking about people's hair or whatever, you'd have experts in the area. And also, by contrast, you would look at the Bush, chickens in the foxes in the chicken coop. It would explode the patriarchal idea.
Yeah.
I'd make myself available for Secretary of State.
There you go. See?
Jurisdiction over election.
So, just as advice for the Green Party.
Let's move on to the next question, please, with all due respect. Any other reporters have questions, please? Becky.
Becky Weber, Green Jeans. Mr. Nader, you talked about what you would have to say to members of Congress, Democratic Party. What do you have to say to members of the Green Party about states in Pennsylvania?
About what?
About the situation in Pennsylvania.
Oh no, the Green Party's been struggling. I mean, Nader Romanelli was this, as you know, the Green Party candidate for the U.S. Senate. All the small parties have to get together on this, and they have indicated in prior years that they have gotten together on this, but it's not enough. We need some fair-minded members of the legislature from either major political parties to take a stand. Remember, you're in a state where the governor vetoed the state legislature's attempt to up the number of signatures to 97,000 for a presidential candidate about 10 years ago. Was it Governor Ridge who did that? Yeah. He's a Republican governor. And he vetoed it, and I called him up to congratulate him, and I had urged him to do so earlier. And I said, why did you do it? He said, because it was very unfair. This is very unfair to third parties, so we need allies in there.
I'd just like to add that the Green Party of Pennsylvania has been cooperating with other third parties in ballot access issues.
And don't be afraid to step up to the microphone here. We can catch you a lot clearer. Over here.
Mr. Nader, you said your decision on whether to run in large part will depend on whether you can round up enough volunteers and pro bono lawyers. Are you actively trying to do that right now? Trying to put together an organization?
No, I'm not right now. But obviously I'm getting letters from, just got a letter from a pro bono lawyer in California saying that he's willing to help. So, but no, I'm not actively doing it.
Do you anticipate actively doing that in the months to come?
Yeah, if I move to the next stage.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nader, what do you think your role is in helping Green Party candidates like Carl succeed on the local and statewide levels?
Well, I still help and support Green Party candidates. In 2006, as Cliff knows.
Right here.
Yeah, sorry. I supported Cliff Thornton for the governorship. I supported Ralph Ferrucci for the Senate. Actually, Ralph got on the debates, and Cliff was excluded from the debates, the state debates. I went to California and supported Peter Camejo and other jurisdictions as well. So I think the Green Party platform is the best. It's the best platform of any political party. It's a lot broader and deeper than it's given credit for.
Just to add to that, what was produced from the campaign in Connecticut was a video on Current TV, which won the award. In 2 weeks, that video will go national and be aired in 40 million homes. So we are making progress. We just have to continue to keep the pressure on, thanks to Ralph.
And Cliff, that's at currenttv.com, right?
CurrentTV.com.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Paul Van Heeden, brainshrub.com. Considering that Americans can pay their taxes digitally and use a digital signature, is there a front that on your ballot access campaign to allow Americans to sign petitions using a digital signature rather than actually having to sign? Have you thought about this as this part of your overall strategy?
Well, as far as I know, it's prohibited by every state law.
But they can pay their taxes with
that
digital
is,
signatures.
well, that's the next frontier. I mean, why, with the safeguards in place, why should it be? Why do we have to stand on a rainy street corner in Houston with 90-degree temperature, receiving all kinds of catcalls from recovering Democrats when it can be done electronically? It's really interesting that all of these major party consultants and avant-garde computerists don't really recommend it, are not promoting that. Because they know they're going to lose control if they do. They're going to lose control of the ballot access obstruction process.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nader, Ralph Nader. I'm Dan Murphy. I just drove in from Lowell, Massachusetts, so that I could introduce my son Patrick to you, who's running for as an independent for the 5th Congressional District.
Age 25.
Age 25, yes. So you read what was sent to you?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So what I'm asking, I have a question for you. What I'm asking is that you spend 2 minutes with him sometime during the evening.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions from reporters, please? Yes, sir.
You said to Reed Smith, you're opening up the greatest confrontation in ballot access of any law firm in American history, so you better get ready. The Democrats, you're not going to get a free ride this cycle. What exactly do you mean by that? Specifically the second part, Democrats, you're not going to get a free ride this cycle.
Well, now we're going to be ready for it. And that means we will confront them at every level, the litigation level, media level, investigative level. They better have clean hands.
Can I add something? You might argue the Democrats have blown their playbook because now they've taught the Green Party what tricks there are in the bag, and they're easy to respond to. This can't happen twice. I think that's the important point to consider.
Though I would be quick to add, in Pennsylvania it did happen twice, and they did modify instead of ordering us to be in 12 or 13 different courtrooms, Instead, they forced us to have 9 volunteers every day, 8:30 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, for an 8.5-week period. Something that is very difficult for a party with a few $1,000s in the treasury and only 17,000 registered members. So I wouldn't be too sure, but I agree with Mr. Nader that we need to go after them, and we should not, let me repeat, we cannot let these judges off of the hook. We know what we're getting from the politics. What about the courts? This is something that should be chilling to all of you. Look what was done to me, sir. You were putting your son at risk to that kind of destruction as an independent unless we care. It's not a theory. It's not abstract.
Didn't you say earlier that you feel like you have to bet your house now to run for office in Pennsylvania?
Well, I can't see how it's not a bill of attainder when the price tag for an independent failed ballot attempt is about $100,000. In my case, it would destroy me if I were forced to pay it. Being a man of modest means and not having the ability to have them take my stuff in order to, because I'm a green, I don't want stuff, I give it away. But they can take my liberty if this is ultimately something that sticks, because failure to obey a court order is punishable by contempt, and contempt carries a penalty of, among other things, imprisonment. I will not be a political prisoner. I will not be a victim. I am a retired officer of the court, and if I can do my duty with honor and distinction at the lowest rung, we won it from the highest courts in this country.
I should probably also add that in 2005, when I was chair of the state party and we were putting a slate together, when I agreed that I would run for governor and I talked to Carl about running for Senate, the first thing I said was, we have to realize that whoever runs in 2006 is going to get sued. And sure enough, that came to pass. And I really credit Carl, and so does the whole state party, for being the person who stood up there and said, bring it on.
Lion Kern. Mr. Nader, is this going to become a Supreme Court case? Ballot access.
Well, we went up 6 times, I think, on 2004, and we were denied cert. But I understand that the last 2 or 3 times there was some modest dissent by Justice Breyer. So I think these are very well-written briefs that we send them, and they've got to read them. Their clerks begin to read them, so it's really an educational process. This is the way the Civil Rights Movement did. They constant up, defeated, up, defeated, up, defeated, and they started to break through. It's going to be a little bit more difficult with this court because Scalia is on record as basically saying this is a 2-party country. It's a rather bold statement, but I think we may get a cert petition accepted in a few years, I would say. We gave them all kinds of fact situations. They turned them all down, but we know that there was a lively discussion among the clerks of these.
Are there any more reporters who have a question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Nader, you said that it's kind of like a progressive process to finally get this ballot access to the Supreme Court. How do you think that Mr. Romanelli's case, with the publicity that it received, moves that movement forward?
Well, it was even worse than in my case, where they assessed Mr. Romanelli's with attorney fees and then assessed his attorney. This is really getting pretty raw. And so the further they push the envelope with their partisan judges, that is these corporate law firms, maybe they'll attract the attention of reporters to dig in and see what's behind all this, who the players are, where who's getting paid, who covered up. There's a lot of things behind the scenes here that need to be uncovered. There may be some whistleblowers, but I think does that answer your question? Huh?
You got something more to add to it?
Anybody else want to add? Yeah.
In my situation, I was running for Congress in the 14th District, which is Pittsburgh and parts of Allegheny County, which is 200 miles away from Harrisburg, where the counting of the signature process was to take place. So no matter how much confidence I had in my signatures, and I did have confidence in them, I still was subjected to having to spend week after week after week in a courtroom in Harrisburg, 200 miles from my job and my family and my means of making a livelihood. So regardless of how good these signatures are, this is still something that any third-party candidate is subjected to. And then, of course, in my case, my signatures were upheld. But had they not been upheld, I would have been facing the same type of penalty that Mr. Nader and Mr. Romanelli were. And furthermore, in Carl's case, he got a lot of bad press. I got zero press. There was no newspaper in Pittsburgh or anywhere in the state that was willing to mention that my petitions were being challenged. So I was helpless, unable to get any help from outside, and we had to rely only on our own means, which fortunately were enough, but still, it's something that candidates should not have to go through.
Just as an aside, see how the system is rigged? Look how the system is rigged. No one would say that Mexico and Brazil had the level of democratic processes that we have in our country, with all our imperfections. But in Mexico and Brazil, you could elect, you could almost elect an Obrador, and you can actually elect a Lula. And I think Obrador won, but you could never do that in the United States. The system is too rigged. You could never elect a really populist candidate with a record of accomplishment. And we're supposed to be more democratic, small d, than the Mexican oligarchic system or the Brazilian plutocratic system. But they had enough elbow room and enough electoral flexibility so the voters could actually elect someone like Lula and Obrador. So these comparisons are very important with Western democracies, third world countries, just to show us how serious the problem is here. I mean, what other country can people run for office and be praised for all of their record of achievement and get very few votes because they don't fit in a corrupt, rigged electoral college, two-party, winner-take-all system? That excludes them from the debates. I mean, let's get serious here. We're losing our democracy, I used to say, on the installment plan. I have to find another metaphor, especially with what's going on in Washington.
Take one more question. Well, we'll take two more questions. Go ahead.
Mr. Nader, you mentioned in talking about the Pennsylvania petition challenges, how a voter who signs a petition and they moved and not updated the voter registration should still have the right to sign that petition. But doesn't that invite voter fraud? If somebody has, say, moved and in 20 years hasn't updated voter registration information and may not even live in the same precinct or the same county anymore, why should they still have full voting rights? What if they try to vote? I mean, that would be voter fraud. Isn't there a state interest in
Pennsylvania, there's a number of people who continue, for example, to be registered at their parents' home. So they might be off and married, but they go back to that original district to vote. As long as they have a residency there, that's perfectly legal, because the Pennsylvania voter law doesn't require that you be domiciled where you are registered, just that it be consistent. So someone signing their name for 20 years at their current address with their spouse, you get them on a street corner at the mall, they scribble their current address instead of remembering, oh, I'm registered at Mama's house. The question is, if you are going to scrutinize each voter's signature to that standard, then what about the standard we hold the challengers to? We get challenged without any specificity as to what's wrong with these signatures. In my case, it was too overwhelming for not only the Democrats to prepare a challenge, but also for the Department of State to competently handle that challenge. Where's the demand for them? Just hold the system to the same level that you are trying to hold a voter and everything will be fine. But when we expect perfection on the part of you, and then these major systems could make any mistake in the world and still get to roll over you, what's wrong with that? Is that the spirit of the American horse? And why are my countrymen and women just laying down and taking it? We must fight back and we must expose this.
First of all, why do we have these registration requirements anyway? North Dakota, same-day voter registration. You show up to vote and you register. One. Canada, it's done in the census, isn't it? It's part of the census. It's over after you're counted in the census. And here we are figuring out, parsing this and that and so forth.
And in my case, the judge never looked at the signatures. It was all the volunteers. And then they tried to take me to contempt court to hold me in contempt for not having enough volunteers. So we were able to get the lawyer to pay for a temp service to help us. Well, then the Democrats are able to put their own person as a plant in the temp service, and they go to court saying, here's a Green Party volunteer that stipulated to this, and the court knows what's going on, and they sit there. And on January 9th, as we were going through that kangaroo court on the appeal, the three other judges from the same body, the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, decided a case in which they said attorney's fees cannot be assessed in these areas unless fraud or forgery are demonstrated, not alleged. And ironically, it was a case that began in my hometown for a local activist who was fined $11,000 by a Democratic judge for trying to organize regarding a firehouse in the neighborhood. It was taking the Nader case and applying it to little old Luzerne County. Well, the Commonwealth Court said this is out of line, judge is out of line. They overthrew it the same day that I'm sitting with Judge Kelly in this kangaroo court with no one paying any attention to the good faith and the quality of our filing. Make no mistakes, the Green Party filing was not wrought with forgery, but it was wrought with integrity. It was an unbreakable challenge, and that's why it took them 9 weeks, and in the long run they had to cheat to pull it off, and I feel violently deprived of my right to articulate these important issues.
You also have to realize that the discussion of whether a voter has moved or not is just one of the shams that the courts are throwing up against us now. I handled a case in 2005 where a candidate was thrown off the ballot in Dauphin County for such exciting reasons as not having changed his driver's license. And for that matter, talking about people who move, how about the people who don't move? I don't know about any of you, but my parents lived in the same house for 40-some years. Now, in case you haven't noticed, people's handwriting changes a little when they get older. And yet, someone who lives at the same address for 40-some years isn't going to keep registering to vote. I have been working on cases where I have seen both the Democratic Party assailants and judges saying, well, look, this handwriting is not the same as the handwriting on file for a person who is now 70 years old and registered to vote when they were first able.
In Ohio, 2004, we had a champion signature gatherer in Toledo, and all of her signatures, well over 1,200, were disqualified on the grounds that her handwriting at age 52 was different from her handwriting when she registered to vote at age 21. This is what's going on. By the way, same-day voter registration in Minnesota helped elect Ventura. We're not just talking theory here.
I spent 4 weeks in Harrisburg looking at people's signatures and verifying them. And I can tell you categorically from my experience that when you're talking about the address on file in the voter record system and the address on the petition being different, we're not talking about people moving away for 20 years and being far away. By and large, what we're talking about are, say, students who registered to vote when they lived in the dorms, and then a couple semesters later they move off campus, but they still vote at the same place. It's still in the same precinct. Also, what was not uncommon was when the Pennsylvania voter registration offices made their database, there were data errors. There were typographical errors. So instead of writing 81 Washington Street, they wrote 18 Washington Street. Yet these were still disqualified, even where it was clearly a typographical error on the part of the state. And this is not uncommon at all.
Let's take one more question, but before we do, let me remind everyone that in a few minutes the rally will begin over at Sovereign Performing Arts Center at 6th Street and Washington. That's 1 block away. Look for the marquee that says Green Party. And yes.
Thank you, Babette Hogan. I'd like to know what Mr. Nader or any of you other would specifically recommend to people, common people, to do to thwart this in states that have yet to have been affected.
Someone once said, the only thing that guarantees our freedom is personal responsibility. And we lost that somewhere between Vietnam and presidential fellatio. The only thing that guarantees ballot access and getting us into debates is responsibility. We have to be responsible, and the only way you're going to do that is continuously put the pressure on the Dems and the Repubs. If we don't keep running candidates for office, do we or do we not deserve what ensues?
I can answer the question based on what happened in Illinois last year. It was a strange circumstance in that the media in Illinois happened to loathe the incumbent governor, who managed to waste $800,000 of taxpayer dollars. They were more than willing to burn him, and the general public started to wake up. So when our candidate for governor of Illinois got on the ballot in Illinois, that was Rich Whitney, he got 360,000 votes, and he got 10% of the vote, and we have an established party in Illinois because of that. So the voters have proven that when there is cooperation and not obstruction from the media, that they will follow through and they will do the right thing. A lot of it is on pressuring the media.
Obviously, a lot of the changes come from the legislature, so there has to be pressure on the legislature. And a lot of changes is to generate more judicial decisions so that the type of proper interpretation of Pennsylvania law, as Justice Saylor concluded, will become the norm. And in effect, it would overturn the kind of misinterpretation by Judge Collins. That would take care of tens of thousands of signatures that are now disqualified. The address, the registration address, whether you are registered and can sign a petition, etc. That's already in the statute. You just need judicial affirmation, the way Saylor concluded. And third, there was a mess in Florida. There are a lot of messes in Florida, but ballot access is no longer one of them if you're part of a small party. And that's because there was enough pressure on the legislature in Tallahassee to pass a law that established a commission which basically reformed the system. It doesn't reform it for independent candidates, but if you're part of a party, you can get on very easily. If you're an independent candidate, you still got to get 97,000 signatures. But that was really a surprise that a two-party dominated legislature did appoint a study commission whose recommendations they accepted and passed into Florida law. So there's a variety of ways, but it really helps if the media would pay more attention to these kinds of things.
Is the Saylor dissent posted somewhere around?
Yes, Bruce, it's online.
Yeah, if you simply type in Saylor and Nader, Let me just give you the correct spelling of Saylor. Excuse me. It's going to be, you can Google it. I hate to just use a brand name. You can Yahoo it. Saylor. And if you do that and Nader, I think you'll come up with pretty easily.
Supreme Court Justice.
Yes.
And Judge Saylor also filed a dissenting opinion on that issue only in our case. And in the dissenting opinion, he reminded his colleagues that we filed 100,000 signatures and made the contention that a qualified elector need not be a registered voter. And I don't think that that's a stretch, looking for any kind of legal chicanery, because the petition submission deadline in Pennsylvania is August 1st, but the deadline to register to vote is in mid-October. So with that time in between, many people might decide whether or not they're going to register to vote based on who is on the ballot, because there is time. So it is a valid argument that apparently Justice Saylor's colleagues should have more knowledge or sympathy to the argument, because Justice Saylor consistently scolds and dissents on that issue.
So that's 3 decisions by Justice Saylor, dissents. 2 in the Nader Camejo case and 1 in Carl Romanelli. If you're looking for all of them.
Okay, look, I think we should adjourn now.